Well, welcome back, everybody. Paul and I are, we've got a new episode for you that we were guests on the Infinite Banking Initiative podcast. So we're going to play that for you here after this short little intro. But who do we talk with, Paul? We talk with David Stearns, who's the president of the Nelson Nash Institute, and his daughter, Lee, who is actually Nelson Nash's granddaughter. David
Correct.
was Nelson's son-in-law and worked very closely together. In fact, there's a funny story. You remember that story David always tells? It's like the first when I asked Nelson if I could marry his daughter, the first thing he said was like, "Do you have life insurance?" And he's like, "No, no, sir." I was like, "Well, you got to get some." Like that was a
At the time,
requirement to marry his daughter.
yeah, he probably only had SGLI, right? Single army dude, right?
Yeah, and it was
That's all
probably
he
like
had.
$50,000 back
50
then. Who
grand probably
knows?
at the time,
Yeah,
early 80s,
yeah,
late 70s, early 80s. So, yeah, nothing.
yeah.
So, well, yeah, that was fun. It was fun. It was an honor to be invited on there. We kind of talked about like how we were introduced to IBC, and you told your story. And of course, my story is even simpler because I just said, "Well, Dave told me about it," and that's
Read a
how I
book
found
and
out
it was
about it.
sold. Yeah,
Read one book, read the case for IBC, and was ready to go. And
yeah,
have since added, four more policies on top of the four that I opened through you. So,
yeah,
yep, I get it.
yeah. So this, I mean, some of you have heard these stories before, but it's just good every once in a while, I guess, to give IBC from our personal perspective and what drew us to it and what got us to the point of wanting to teach other people about it. Why it's that big of a deal to us and how much impact it's had on our lives and how we've been able to share that with our clients and bring it to you all.
Yeah, and you get to hear from people also that were extremely close with Nelson, being his family. They've had all those conversations with him about IBC and, hey, what were you thinking here? What you were thinking there? It's nice to hear the questions that they might ask, and it's a very simple episode, right? Nothing fancy, but very enjoyable, and I think you guys will still get a lot of value out of it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And we get to see David every spring, February or March at the IBC think tank. So and get to hear his stories about Nelson, and it's a great time. So it was fun to catch up with him and Lee, who's really taken a role in the Nelson Nash Institute now, to move that forward and just do more, bring more people in, create the 10%, as we say.
Yeah, and pass it along to now the third generation, who's going to kind of take the helm and continue this, I guess, pursuance of excellence by telling people about Nelson's message.
And legacy. So yeah, it's a great example of legacy. 3 generations now of practicing and preaching the infinite banking concept. So yeah, we had fun. I hope you guys enjoy. Hey, I'm Dave,
And I'm Paul.
and this is the Wealth Warehouse Podcast. And guess what? If you control your capital, you can control a whole lot of other things. If you don't control your capital, there's very few things you can control. And you can make decisions from a position of strength. That's how I was able to leave different jobs, different careers. I even resigned from the military a couple years ago in the Air National Guard because of what they were trying to force me to do. So I resigned, but I didn't care. You got to have a go to hell fund. So you got to be able to tell your employer, I don't care. I'm not doing that. I'm out. And if you don't have that fund, then you don't have a position of strength.
Well, David and Paul, thank you for joining us on the Infinite Banking Initiative. Tell us about how you guys met. How did you connect with each other?
Well, that's a fun story. So I'll start off and Paul can elaborate, but we were both deployed at the same time. This was back in 2013 and between 2013 and 14, we were deployed together. I was actually, I was Air Force, Paul's Army, of course, if you couldn't tell by his Army retired hat. But I was working attached to an Army unit. And we were in Afghanistan and Bagram, sitting next to each other for 6 months or so. And, realized pretty quickly we were aligned in a lot of different areas. That's where it started.
Yeah, that's about the size of it. We sat across from each other. We're, same interests in politics. We were both family guys, married with children, both pilots, both, and the only mistake, Dave made was he didn't tell me about participating in whole life insurance until 5 years later.
Yep. That was my fault. I don't know why we never got onto the subject of finances necessarily. I know there were some other guys in that group too we were talking with, and there was a lot of stocks and things like that. And it's probably because this concept at that time, even in 2013, I mean, I started in 2010. That's where I first started my first 3 policies. But I didn't know anybody else in the world who did this besides myself and the guy who introduced it to me. That was it. So, I brought the conversation up a few times to people throughout, those early years, and it never went anywhere. And they looked at me weird and thought I was a moron. So I just kind of kept it to myself, really. But then what happened when I did introduce Paul to it?
Here we are.
5 years later. Yeah. I sent him one book, and it was actually the case for IBC, because I thought that was a really good book geared towards business owners, investors. I told him, of course, read Becoming Your Own Banker, but I just sent him that in the mail, and he called me. Well, I don't know how quickly he read it, but you called me right after that and said, let's do this.
So when did you first read Becoming Your Own Banker?
I first read it in 2010. So thankfully, that was the guy who introduced it to me was a friend. I'd known him for about 12 years at that point. And he went through the '08 crash, lost a bunch in real estate, realized there's got to be a better way. What am I doing wrong? And he stumbled upon Nelson's book, and he started a business, and he introduced it to me a couple years later and made me read the book. I read the book, and then we went back and forth for like 6 months with questions, because I was not that quick of a study, I suppose. There wasn't as much content out there to help me along, and enough as many people to talk to as there are today. So, and then I don't know, when did you read it? Right after, Paul?
I did. I read The Case for IBC. Then I read Becoming Your Own Banker. Then I read Building Your Warehouse of Wealth. I think I sprinkled in Paul Horsley's book in there somewhere, and then probably every other book from a practitioner that's out there I read. And I told Dave right after reading The Case for IBC, I remember reading it. I'm sitting in bed at Fort Knox, Kentucky, in Brandenburg, Kentucky. And it's 2018 when that book first came out. No context. Dave's just like, hey, send me this. And I'm like, what is this? What is IBC? I have no idea what it is. I was a first command client at the time. I owned regular vanilla non-par whole life, and I'd owned it since I was a lieutenant. We had 10 policies with OPIs. So I was used to paying some level of whole life premium. But yeah, I just immediately understood it. Was like, this is the concept I've been looking for, and this is what my financial advisor was never able to bridge for me between, hey, I'm going to retire from the Army at age 40, whatever. What do I do? I've got all this money in the thrift savings plan or an IRA. What do I do for money for like big things in between then and, well, and they never had a good answer for that. But anyway, I was ready to go and to buy, participating whole life before Dave even had his life insurance license. So that's the only thing that held me up for a few weeks.
I slowed it down. Because he had to wait until I had my license before we could actually do anything with him.
First client.
He was.
First IBC client. And best, obviously.
The ideal client.
The ideal client. That's right.
So Paul, you said you had 10 policies before that?
Yeah, I guess technically we had 12. I still had one in each kid whole life. I think like $100,000 or something each for death benefit. I still have those, actually. I kept them. But we ended up, I bought whole life as a lieutenant at Fort Rucker at flight school. $250,000 policy. It was 100 and, had the military stuff in there. So, because I was a pilot and all that stuff. So that was all underwritten. And but I was able to take the cash value, albeit kind of meager growth of the cash value. I was able to take that, and my wife had the identical portfolio, right? So Tammy was in Hawaii for her first duty station, became a first command client, and had almost identical portfolios. Imagine that, right? Same strategy for everybody. But we were able to 1035 all of our cash value that we had built up over that, from 2003 to 2018, 2019 is when we actually opened the policies with Dave, and retain that cash value and move that basis over to the new policies. So wasn't all for nothing, that's for sure.
Well, so as pilots, when you read Becoming Your Own Banker, there's a lot of flying references in that book. What was your first impression of all of that?
It made sense to me. I liked it. And right now, most of my clients are pilots. Actually, that's kind of the niche that I've geared myself towards, because I speak the language. I flew commercial airlines for a couple of years, so I know their lifestyle. I know how much money they make and what they're doing with their money for the most part. But Nelson's book is it's a natural lead in for them. Talking about headwind, tailwind, becoming more efficient every year. It's great. So I've taken all of that and used it, in these conversations, and it just makes perfect sense.
Yeah, controlling the environment, right? And once you learn how to control the environment, you can get to where you're going a lot more efficiently, right? And so it resonates with pilots, of course. As Dave said, they get it quick.
So then what brought you all to now where you are today working together? So you obviously retired, tell us about that. How did that come about?
Yeah. So opened the policies with Dave went into underwriting in 2018, got the policies issued early 2019. And then I had like Tammy and one of my other friends who's now a client of mine. She was like, why are you you're telling everyone about this and then sending people to Dave, right? He's like, why don't you do this? Don't you want to get into, the financial space eventually when you retire?
So I have Tammy to blame.
Yeah, it's her
for you
fault.
getting licensed.
And I was like, that's a good point. So I was like, well, let me get my license, and seemed like a good idea. And gosh, it, I was just going to do it as a side hustle, which I did for the last 5 years of my Army career. And I either know most of the right people because I wrote 30 policies my first year. 29 of those people I knew from college. I went to Norwich University in Vermont, military school. So all my friends are military guys and gals. And then people that I met on active duty. So it was really just, and then you fast forward a few years, Dave's doing well in the business. I'm doing relatively well in the business. And we're on a hunting trip up in South Dakota. And, we meet one of our idols in the IBC space, Mr. James Nethery, right? Everyone knows James. He's a guy that does it right. We think very highly of him, become very good friends with him. And, he's like, y'all can't start a podcast soon enough. That's what he said. Sitting there, eating Hershey Kisses at the bar at that South Dakota hunting lodge. Is that about right, Dave? I think that's how it went down.
Yeah, that was that was a life-changing trip because we had kind of entertained the idea of starting a podcast. But after that conversation with James, it was, all right, this is what we're doing. And then we just dove in head first to doing that, and hired somebody to produce it and edit it and post it and all that, because we thought, hey, maybe we can do this ourselves. I looked into it for about 10 minutes and said, no, I'm not doing that.
No, not doing that.
And it turns out to be, the best, it's really the best money we've spent, just because, and it gives us an opportunity. Like Paul and I were already talking on a weekly basis, several times a week, just talking. We're like, why don't we just do the same thing, but hit record? And we've been doing that, and we're on 170 something straight weeks without missing a week of podcasting. So I'd say it's one of our favorite things to do. And thankfully James nudged us that direction, and he was right. I'm glad we did wait until we did to start it, though, because by that point we had a couple of years under our belt, and we had a lot of experience and, and felt like we were doing it right.
Yeah, I agree. I think you need to have some success in this business, in interactions with clientele and hearing and dealing with their problems and their fears and their dreams and whatever they have going on. You need to experience that, I think, in order to, content creation is not easy, right? Luckily, Dave's got a huge creative brain and he kind of drives what we discuss every week for the most part. But 170 something weeks in a row, and what we found is this: we kind of give people some basic instructions on how they should listen to the podcast and how they should read Nelson, and you can't listen to him enough or read him enough. And then by the time they get to our first appointment, they're generally ready to go, highly informed, highly educated. They get it. Most have had that light bulb, or, as Nelson would say, the baseball bat across the face moment where they're like, oh my God, where were you guys 20 years ago? So it's just been great. And we enjoy it, right? We have a ball. We have a great time on the podcast. We laugh. It's a good time. And we look forward to it every week.
So the podcast generates most of your business now. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's probably more than half of mine now, I would say, or at least half, easily.
I'd say it's about a half. I also get a lot of business from another pilot who's a financial advisor and works only with pilots. And it's rare, right, David, that you can find a financial advisor that believes in giving and paying whole life insurance and infinite banking. But this guy does. And he's like, all of my clients need this, all of my clients, because they make good money. Not that you need to make good money, but they make more than what they know what to do with, and it usually goes to buying cars or boats or stuff you don't need, right? That lifestyle creep, Parkinson's law. So he gets them on this train. Yeah, same. But he gets them on this train early, and they say, wow, this is really great. And they look at it from a different angle than some other people, say a business owner might, but it's an angle that works for them. But yeah, the best, I say the most ideal client profile comes from the podcast, because they've listened, they've learned, they know how we think and what our philosophy is. And we don't have to talk them down from doing these really ridiculous designs they see on TikTok and all this stuff. They know they're not going to get rich buying cars when they come to us.
That's what I like to hear right there. Like getting an accurate message out there. You can't get rich doing this, but you can certainly, like you said before, control your environment, control your financial environment, which is the key to the whole thing with IBC.
Yeah, I think what we do well is we don't try to embellish. IBC is good as it is. Once you understand it, and the whole life product properly designed, participating whole life is a great product to, obviously it's the ideal product to practice IBC with. So, we try to keep it very basic, very simple, because it is, and it's a very simple concept, right? People want to overcomplicate it, and there's so much, I don't know, less ideal content out there. I'm being gracious here, that's out there on the internet, but it's very simple. You were putting money over there, try putting some or more of it over here, and fight back that urge to buy another boat, which I am fighting that urge.
Well, I'm looking for a boat, but I'm looking for, instead of buying a condo, I figure I'd buy a boat, and that way I can move my condo, so there you go.
Well, if you want to buy a car, just go to Paul's used car dealership, about to be located in Tennessee.
Yeah, everything's for sale.
He's got plenty of them. Oh, that's his kryptonite is cars.
I'm afraid to ask how many and what kind. So there you go. So,
6. You'll have to come up and visit. It's not that long of a drive. You'll have to come up to Knoxville and check out my garage that I'm building. It's gonna be awesome.
I'll be driving through on Saturday. So there you go.
There's a urinal in it. Just, it's pretty awesome.
In your garage?
Yeah. Yeah, all the neighbors, all the guys were like, "How did you get your wife to agree to all this?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then I was like, "Oh yeah, there's a urinal in there too, and air conditioning." And they were like,
You're the next Jay Leno, right?
"Oh gosh, no, just a tiny fraction of that."
Well, so did you either one of you ever have the opportunity to meet Nelson?
I did. Yeah, I did in 2019. That was my first think tank in Birmingham, and I got to meet Nelson for the one and only time in my life. So that was a huge blessing to meet him, early in 2019, right? And he was still sharp as a tack. And as soon as somebody, I went with somebody and they introduced me to Nelson, said, "Hey, he's a pilot." And, of course, you bring up pilot or flying to Nelson, that's what you're going to talk about. So it was good to just have a little, there's plenty of people waiting in line just to talk to the guy. So I got a couple minutes with him and that was pretty awesome. I'm very happy to say I got to meet Nelson and talk to him in person and take a picture with him. And that's still up on my NNI practitioner finder, my photo with Nelson. But yeah, what a special opportunity. And I would have loved to hear him speak live. At that time, he wasn't speaking at the think tanks. So would have been nice to go earlier, but at least I made it when I did.
Yeah, I missed out due to some uber important TDY trip that I can't remember what it was about or what it was for. But looking back, I should have tried to get out of it.
Should have skipped.
But Paul, you say you did meet him though, right?
No, I never got to. I was going to go with Dave to that think tank.
Okay.
We were both, very new to the concept and I would have went. And I remember I was TDY up in upstate New York. I was at U.S. Army Cadet Command at the time, and I was doing some surveys or something. Again, it was mildly interesting, but it was my job, and I had to do it, and I couldn't get out of it, so I missed it.
And that was the think tank where we premiered This Is Nelson Nash. So that documentary is still out there for anyone who's watching this and who has not seen that. We definitely recommend. That's a great starting point if you are new to this concept and new to just understanding who Nelson Nash was and, what kind of man he was. So that was a great think tank, and, glad you were there and able to be a part of that one. Tell us a little bit about your involvement in the practitioner community and why was that important to you to become an authorized IBC practitioner?
I couldn't think of any reason not to. Like if I wanted to truly be the best I could possibly be at my profession, my chosen profession, which I think is unethical to not be the best you can be at your chosen profession, then I needed to become a practitioner. And if I'm not mistaken, David, am I still the second highest score on that practitioner test?
Would you got 98?
I'm pretty sure I was at the time.
You got 98, right?
Probably something like that. I'm a classic over-preparer.
No, I mean, yeah. The early guys did very well on the test. The Canadians do very well on the test, but lately we've had a lot of bolos, man. I'll tell you what, maybe it's harder than I thought it was, but no, yeah, you're one of the top fives, definitely.
Well, and it was good training because you read the book, but if you go through the course, the practitioner course itself, and this is what I tell anybody I'm talking to on the phone, any prospects that call or set up time with me in our first meeting, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm trying to find the right person." I say, as long as you're finding an IBC practitioner, you're going to be in good hands. If they're not a practitioner, I can't recommend them as my professional opinion. So that right there, I think is just kind of the stamp of approval that you're legitimate, that you do it the way that Nelson intended. And not only that, it's probably been the greatest network I've been a part of. The greatest source of, the guys that I've met through that course, I'm friends with them, and we talk all the time throughout the year. We see each other throughout the year. And we even started our own, mastermind.
We have a little
once
posse.
a month. Yeah, with a group of us. So you've had some on the podcast, but we meet up once a month and just say, what's going on in business? Where's everybody's sticking points? What have you learned that you can pass on to the rest of us? So that's been a lot of fun, just an informal meetup. I'd encourage a lot of other practitioners to do that, kind of find your tribe of a good handful of practitioners and get together on a monthly basis somehow and just learn from each other.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Yeah, several folks doing the same thing, and it helps us also because majority of the applicants for the training program now have a mandatory requirement for a mentor, for somebody to as a sounding board to get them over the hump before we even let them be listed for the public, and so guys like you who can individually mentor them, but plus bring them in on a monthly virtual meetup, really gets these new students ingrained in the community much faster. So that's a terrific idea. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
I would echo everything Dave said, but it's just, you need to be close to the source. And the closest thing to Nelson Nash is the organization, right? It's the NNI. And that's why I chose it. I became a practitioner in 2020. I was 8 or 9 months, David, into the business. I remember getting my interview, and I was having a very successful year that first year. So it was great. And, and it expands your knowledge, right? You learn what's important. And, and then in our monthly call that we have in our little miniature think tank, there's so much learning going on. Dave and I will be just out. I'll be walking down here around my neighborhood, and I'm learning so much from my peers. Still, you can learn something from all these guys. There's some just brilliant minds. And I've often said, I think the brightest life insurance agents in the country, and well, I guess I don't write in Canada, but are in that room every year at that think tank.
Oh, hands down. Yeah. And the learning is nonstop, and it's fun also to see guys doing better than you. So you have somebody to chase. Like James, we're chasing James every year. I like to look at the leaders board at the companies we write for and be like, oh, look, I'm nipping at James's heels. I'm not really. I'm not even close. But it's fun to see those guys year in, year out, performing, educating, coaching, and bringing new people into this concept and putting that in play in their lives. So the amount of lives that we've affected, I think that's the coolest thing. Getting in this business, because I did other stuff before this. I never dreamed when I was a kid of becoming a life insurance agent, right? I don't think anybody does. My own father sold life insurance, though. My dad sold life insurance in the late 90s, early 2000s, and he did pretty well for himself. But I never thought for a second I'd be in the life insurance business. The only reason I got into this business, like a lot of other people who come through the practitioner course, I think, is because of the infinite banking concept. If it wasn't for that, there's no way I'd be anywhere close to like, as Ryan Griggs says, selling the most maligned financial product in the world, and being hated on by every other financial professional in the country. But it's been a blessing to see the hundreds of families that I've gotten to affect through this. And then the people they introduce it to, and so on and so on. I mean, I introduced it to Paul by just giving him a book that somebody else put in the sweat, and the work for. I just handed it to him, and now he's got hundreds of other families that he's brought this to. So it's just really, really cool and fun to see.
Well, how would you say that you guys have grown, in your career, in your practice since you started?
Well, I think the biggest thing for both of us is that you learn who you can spend your time on and who is going to be probably a waste of your time. So since the very beginning, I lead with the book. And now that we have a podcast, I lead with the book and the podcast. And if somebody's willing to read the book, I tell them it's 92 pages, and there's charts in there that you don't have to ignore them, but you're not gonna be able to figure them out probably. Or some people do though. And if they do that, that's a good sign. So I think for me, it's just learning where to spend my time. Early on though, I would chase people. Because I know this is so great. I know it. pay very high premium myself as a family. We're back up to 12 policies, and it's great. And I would feel bad early on, like, oh, I lost that girl or lost that guy or whatever. They just I couldn't get them to see it. But now I don't. It doesn't, it bothers you. You know, you want to help people, but I don't, if they're not willing to put in a little bit of work, meaning read the book at least, and then have a conversation with me about it, then, so I guess knowing where to spend your time has been the biggest learning thing as far as a business standpoint for me. So I can focus on who wants this more rather than waste kind of time on people who are just like, well, convince me, Paul, sell this to me. I was like, well, I'm the worst salesman on the planet. So that's not going to happen. But yeah, so I think that's what I would say about that.
Yeah, I would echo that because it's some of the things Nelson says in that book. You're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But until you learn it firsthand, it doesn't really drive the point home. Like when he says, infinite banking is caught, not taught. That is so true, because I used to try to teach people this in the beginning and spend a lot of time, like Paul was saying, one-on-one or chasing people or giving everybody the same equal amount of time. And you could teach them till you're blue in the face, but if they don't catch it, then you're wasting your breath. Maybe they'll come back around later, but it's not going to be because of me. So they need to catch it. So that's what it is. It's, anytime I spend on somebody who's not ready for it is time I'm not able to spend with somebody who is and who's ready to jump. That's why, I used to try to pull in people who were over on, the other side of the fence where, buy a term, invest the difference, whole life is from Satan. And I realized, you know what, that's not my audience. That's not my clientele. Those aren't the people I even want to spend my time with. Right. That's a great thing about this business too, is that you get to spend time with people you want to spend time with. I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday. I was meeting them at Caribou, a local, one of those rare times I actually get out of the office and meet somebody in person, because most of our business is virtual. But I was telling him, I only have one client that I don't like, one out of hundreds. And if I could go back in time and not take him on as a client, I probably would. But just one. Like everybody else, I would love to sit down and have a beer with. Every one of them. Yeah.
Would you play the guessing game with your class? Which one of you guys do I not like?
Yeah. If you're listening, I probably like you. So you don't have to worry that it's you.
That's a good one. Yeah, we've heard about, dragging them in and dragging them around. That's pretty common terminology, but not liking a guy like this, that's even more focused. I like that. So
yeah. Well, you don't want, and I always tell people this is called, the book is called Becoming Your Own Banker, not Dave or Paul becoming your banker. And that's why the first step in our process is education, period. If you haven't read the book, you get people sometimes that they see, I've got a video on YouTube, a 4.5 minute video that's got, several 100,000 views. And every lead I get from that one is a terrible, terrible lead. I swear, I just had one this week and I could tell within 30 seconds that they're not my client. Like, you're just looking for the next shiny nickel. And maybe that video, the video explains it very simply, what infinite banking is. But I found, man, I've got no leads from that video after hundreds of thousands of views, because people don't spend the time to actually get educated. They want the 4.5 minute version instead of spending the 3 hours to read Nelson's book. And if you're not going to do that, I'm not going to work with you.
Yep. And that comes with experience. So if you're a young budding agent out there, that's what I would say. I tell all the folks, David, that I'm mentoring, and I know Dave does the same. I was like, we're not in the convincing business. This is not something that, again, it's caught, not taught. You can give them all the facts. And, some people are numbers people, engineers and real estate investors. Like, my goodness gracious, people. Like, concept, right? Like, the numbers in the book aren't your numbers. Those are from 2000. and they're not yours. It's 2025. Like, anyway. So, but no, we love working with people, and it's, it's just it's a very satisfying business when people just get excited. We have some recent clients, all podcast listeners recently, that are just super excited and, have brought in 3 or 4 other people. Like, you got to read this book and listen to these guys and then get on their calendar. And they've, to their credit, they've done it all Navy guys, all out in California. So hopefully they watch this.
Well, you know what one of the great things is? I was talking to a financial advisor a couple months ago when the market dipped, big time, and then it rebounded a week later or whatever. But he was like, after this week, I'm ready to retire, man. I was like, really? The only texts I received from my clients were like, man, I'm so thankful I've got my money in whole life insurance because I don't even care what the market does. What a great business that, you don't have to take calls or make calls that delivers bad news. Right? I mean, it is life insurance. So at some point I'm going to get to that call that, hey, somebody just passed away, somebody graduated. I haven't been there yet. It hasn't happened to me or Paul yet, though. Of course, our clientele is closer to our age anyway. So it'll happen eventually, but you don't get the bad news phone calls. Hey, what's happening to my money? I don't know. I don't touch your money. You're the banker. And guess what? It's still there and it hasn't dropped.
Well, yep. But yeah, Dave, you alluded to, not getting a bad call, i.e. a death benefit check delivery. But that's bad for the family. Okay. And you're the one that actually can bring good news to a situation like that. And many of the practitioners that we've had in the program for a long time, some of the most poignant moments that they talk about is, need for finance is critically important, but they've touched these families that have lost a loved one, and that's the most meaningful thing to them. And that's the most, like I said, the most poignant message that they bring to the community as a whole. Don't forget about that part, because that's critically important also.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it will be nice to be the one person that maybe makes them smile, because they get to hand them a check. Like, Ben Feldman talks about, they paid pennies in and they get dollars out. It's the only place where you can create cash. So that's what we get to do.
Well, in what ways have you seen IBC impact your clients' lives? You've talked about, just the recent example of the market reactions to the market, but in what other ways have you seen this impact your clients?
I think a lot of our clients have changed the way they've thought about finance in general. Whether they were stock market people, or they were real estate people, or they were just people that handed their money over to a financial advisor. That's probably the biggest impact, is people that previously, were working with somebody, and then they're like, you know what? I'm smart enough to go do this myself and not pay 1% to 2% fees to you or something. As an example, we've had people take control over their escrow accounts for their mortgages, and flow money, for college tuition or private school tuition, or get a better deal on a car if they use the dealer's financing, right? And they get $2,000 off if you finance it through us. Can I pay it off next week without a penalty? Yes. And then they pull a policy loan and pay it off, and then, and now own the vehicle. So we've had, and we talk about it on our podcast a lot, we've had just a ton of client stories. Personally, I'll speak as Dave's best client is, I was able to kind of realize a dream a lot sooner, because I started putting meaningful amount of money into premium 5+ years before I left the Army, 6 years before I left the Army. We started just redirecting what we were putting on the military's TSP and redirected that all towards premium. And the only reason I'm building a house right now in East Tennessee, and that's the only reason I'm able to do that, is because of Nelson's book. And I was lucky enough to know a guy that was already doing it, and was like, hey, even though he's really cheap and frugal, he sent me a book. So he spent $20, another $5 to mail it or whatever. So he spent $25, and it's It's been a blessing for me
Well,
and
the
my
only
family.
reason I did that is because you loaned me $100,000 for my real estate investment business.
I did do that. That is true.
So I was like, well, this guy's already kind of doing banking. Why don't I just show him a better way to do it?
That's right. I did make it
yeah.
my first private loan to him as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, I could go on about client stories, but my own, I mean, the way it's impacted my own life has been incredible. In a span of 4 years, I had 4 different careers. So I went from active duty Air Force, just jump shipped after 11 and a half years. And, you know, which most people at that point, they want to stay for the full 20 and get the retirement. Or if you're a pilot like me, you leave the Air Force and go straight to the airlines. I don't want to do that. I thought I'd try my hand at corporate America because there I can really control my own destiny. Well, it turns out there's some limitations in corporate America too. So after doing that for a year, I realized I got to get out of here. So I spent another year and a half building a real estate investment business until I could quit my corporate job. So I went from military to a medical device company being a quality and compliance program manager. Kind of a strange shift from flying A-10s. And then did that for 2.5 years and then went and ran my own real estate investment business. Realized that wasn't in my DNA. I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it at all. Mostly I didn't enjoy the people I had to work with when flipping houses and flipping contracts. If you've ever flipped a house, you probably understand that it's not that enjoyable. It's nothing like HGTV. Let's just say that. So then I decided, what do I like? What am I passionate about? Well, there's 2 things that came to mind right away. One was flying. So I got back into flying. I started flying commercial airlines at that point. And the other was infinite banking. So I, once again, transitioned careers completely for the 4th time or for the 3rd time to a 4th career in a 4-year span and started brand new, started at the bottom and had to work my way up from there. But the only reason I was able to do that is because for the 7 years preceding that, or I guess 4 years before I left the military, I had policies. I was capitalizing my policies. I had confidence that, hey, I'm going to jump over and try something new. I've got money here that I have access to if I need it. So I know my family's not going to starve and we're not going to be homeless. You know, what's the worst case? The worst case is that I have to dip into my policy, take some cash value loans, and then I'll pay them back when I can. I did that 3 times without having a safety net anywhere else other than my policies. That was it. But that allowed me to really pursue what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. I didn't have to wait around and be like, yeah, I've got the golden handcuffs. I got the 401k and the health insurance. I can't leave that. I just said, forget it. I'm leaving it behind. I made a goal of I need to have this much cash value saved up before I'm comfortable leaving this job. And that what that turned down to was about a year's worth of a salary. So I knew if I never made $1 in the next year of my business venture, at least my family, our lifestyle wouldn't be affected. Just my pride. And I could always go back and get a new job, right? What's the worst case scenario? Go back and get another job. Luckily, I didn't have to. And I never will again.
Well, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that with us. Well, what does the infinite banking concept mean to you personally? You've shared your personal journeys with it, but what does, when somebody says, infinite banking concept, how would you describe that to someone?
Control and peace of mind. We've said control many times on this podcast, and the story I just told was about controlling my own life. And guess what? If you control your capital, you can control a whole lot of other things. If you don't control your capital, there's very few things you can control.
Yeah, I think implementing IBC is the obvious thing to do once you understand what the actual problem is. And I think, and I've said it on our podcast, the problem is multifaceted. You've got Uncle Sam, that's a problem, dipping into your wealth, that's, through the tax code. Interest to other people's banks, that's a problem. So once you understand the problem, this becomes the obvious solution. The premium is the solution, as our friend James always says. And once you realize that you can gain the ultimate control over the function of banking, it's a peaceful way to live. Like you said, the stock market, the news is constantly covering, oh, the market's up and down on the radio, on the TV, Bloomberg, whatever. And it's just constant in your face. I'm like, okay, I don't even pay it any attention. Yeah, we have clients that have money in the stock market, but they're savvy people. They know what they're doing. But I don't even, it's mildly interesting to me at this point, because my cash value went up yesterday. It went up today. And, yeah, it's peaceful and it's freedom. It's individual freedom and especially as you age, you get into your 60s and 70s and 80s, when you need it, it's going to be there.
Yeah. And you can make decisions from a position of strength.
Yeah.
Instead of weakness. I mean, that's how I was able to leave different jobs, different careers. I even resigned from the military a couple of years ago in the Air National Guard because of what they were trying to force me to do. So I resigned. Turns out I didn't actually have to resign. Something happened and God stepped in and made a way for me to stay in and still follow my own path. But I didn't care. I had a military commander who told me once, even in the military, a wise guy, not a wise guy, not like Paul would say.
A wise man.
A wise man. And I'm still friends with him. We talk occasionally, and he's a big fan of infinite banking. He's just uninsurable.
Is his name
right
Derek?
Now. Yeah. But he once told me, he said, you got to have a go to hell fund. So you got to be able to tell your employer, I don't care. I'm not doing that. I'm out. And if you don't have that fund, then you don't have a position of strength. And you're probably going to have to, how many people had to sacrifice their principles because they were afraid to lose their job?
Millions.
And if they had prepared in a way that allowed them access to capital when and if they needed it, without penalty, there'd be a lot of people in different positions today.
When you mention that, the first thing I think about is, mandated federal programs that affect, we got a lot of military folks, a lot, that's a relative number, that became interested in IBC because their careers were not, they couldn't complete them, and so this gave them an opportunity to transition, like you suggested, to something that was more related to them making the calls and doing what they thought was appropriate. I guess I'm talking coded here, but the federal mandates really opened up the IBC door for a lot of people, I think, so.
Yeah. At the end of the day, money matters as much as we like to say, or people would like to believe, money is just a tool, blah, blah, blah. Well, money matters. And the golden rule, he who has the gold makes the rules. Well, guess what? He who doesn't have any gold doesn't get to make any rules and pretty much has to follow whatever he's told. And I'm starting my family on the path that'll never be the case for them. Somebody's got to start it. My dad sold life insurance decades ago. I wish he would have started it, but he didn't. It's up to me. And that's what we tell our clients. It's up to you. Somebody's got to start this in your family. It should be you.
Yep. Whether your spouse likes it or not, this is good.
I don't know why spouses complain about having millions of dollars of income tax-free wealth coming their way if something happens to the other spouse. What's to complain about?
I'm not sure. Tammy loves it.
Yeah, so does Hannah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this, this community that is helping so many people and just leaving a lasting impact on the next generations for these clients that you work with and for you personally. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks for doing what you guys are doing. I love listening to this podcast because I feel like it really is geared towards other producers. And and prospects alike. But anybody listening to this can really understand the true intent behind all of the IBC practitioners. It's just a solid group of people. If you say you're part of this network, chances are you're a pretty darn good person, and you're doing good things for your clients, and you have good intentions, and it's just a really great network to be a part of. I'm proud to be a part of it, and I'll continue to be a part of it.
Lee and David, really appreciate being invited. It's quite an honor. We love it. We love doing this. So, I've been enjoying the content as well. You can always learn something from somebody else. And again, the practitioner people they're the best people, and they're really doing right by their clients. And that's why we want to be a part of it and continue to be a part of it.
Enjoyed it very much. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. Until next week, control your capital.
Or somebody else will.
Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. If you'd like to have a conversation with us to see how you can become your own banker, or if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to tackle on a future episode, please send us an email to davidandpaul@theibcguys.com.
And subscribe and leave us a review if you're on Apple. Follow and leave us a 5-star review if you're on Spotify. And please share this with your friends. We'll see you next week.